On this episode of Boundary Breakers, I sit down with Nick Jarjour. Nick is a prominent executive in the global music industry. So much has changed in the music industry over the last 25 or 30 years. In my conversation with Nick, he gives us a peek behind the curtain into the music industry. We talk about how the industry works, what drives its superstars, and how hits are made. Nick has been involved with over 100 global number one hits and over 350 gold and platinum albums. So he knows what he's talking about and has a fascinating perspective. I really think you're going to enjoy this. Boundary Breakers is brought to you by Carter and Clark. Why don't we get started? If you're cool sharing, just tell us a little bit about your upbringing, where you're from, and what early life was like, so we can get an idea of sort of who you are as a guest.
Yeah. So my name is Nick Jarjour. I was born and raised in Montreal, Canada. Over there, it's a French-speaking place, but I'm English. And I always grew up around, creative people, but I was not in any way associated with music whatsoever. My mom would paint on the side. My family was all business people. So growing up as a kid, I remember, in grade 2 or 3, my music teacher, Mr. Kennedy, said, "Hey, Nick, you can play every instrument by ear. I want to pull you aside after class, come in and work on these kids projects that I have." And he gave me the chance to write songs for these kids albums that were then subsequently published. And, I was able to make my first publishing check off of music, which then allowed me to buy this guitar. So my journey started very early, where I would, realize, hey, you can actually do something with this music here and create kind of business around it. As I grew up and became a teenager, by the time I was 16, I was already kind of the promoter and manager of this club. It was 18 plus in Canada, but I had the opportunity to promote and bring these people in. So we had been building that business up. And I was an artist, a writer, a producer. I was in a little group. We opened up for Rihanna by 17, 18 years old, on tour in Canada, and a number of other artists. And then by the time I turned about 18, I said, this isn't for me. I sold the promotion business. I dropped the artist thing and decided to play the behind the scenes figure. I was booking all of our shows, managing essentially a lot of the activities we did. So I decided to give that a chance and went into music business school to pursue my dream to be a manager, label, and publisher in the music industry.
That's awesome. And so it sounds like from second grade, it was very, at least from the perspective of your music teacher, it was clear that you have a very specific talent. So he said you could play any of the instruments by ear.
Yeah, I could never understand how to read music, but I did understand just how to play what I could hear. And, that's how I got into music. But I always had people way more talented than me around me, like the music teacher. He was incredible. And I was very frustrated that I wasn't at that level of talent. So when I started to realize that I can attract or have these incredibly talented people around me, that's when I decided to pivot from being the creator to being a people producer,
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. So what is it about, I know this is a difficult question to answer. In some ways it's a silly question, but what is it about music that's so, that attracts you so much, or that is so inspiring to you? Why did you want to build a career around music per se?
In other industries, there's this expression, ROI, return on investment. For me, I know music has the greatest ROE, return on emotion. And the feeling that you get from a song, whether it's a 99-cent song or a free song you're listening to on YouTube or something that you just hear somebody playing for you, it could save people's lives. It could create the dynamic for a first kiss. Music is really a bookmark for moments in our life. And for me, it was always that most compelling form of art and communication. There's a sacredness to the way that even musicians interact with each other on stage, and the timing, even if they can't hear each other, they can be completely synchronized. When you go deeper into scientific studies about these things, it's all about like the level of our brain that is operating during that course of the creative process, which can operate in other things with a surgeon when he's doing a surgery, or with any high level painter, anybody who's an expert at what they're doing. Music to me is the purest form of that. Personally, it connected with me more than any other discipline or any other passion I ever had. And when I got the chance to see that I could make a living in it or change people's lives in the music industry, it was an immediate love at first sight moment.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's so cool. It's I love talking to folks that, you know, so many people, so many young professionals struggle with what is it they're passionate about? What is my why? What am I after? What am I doing? So I love connecting with folks that, you know, from the second grade, it's been very clear to them that they wanted to, you know, they knew sort of generally what they wanted to do or be around the rest of their life. And so, you know, I'm curious, you said a couple of things that, you know, you drew the conclusion that you didn't want to necessarily be on the creative side anymore, and like you didn't want to necessarily be performing, but you were drawn to this idea that you could be sort of behind other, you know, highly talented artists. I'm curious, you know, as you went through business school, or as you went through music business school, and we're trying to sort of figure out how to do this, is it readily apparent sort of how to execute that? Or is was it a long path sort of trying to figure out all these different pieces?
No, it's never readily apparent, but you can feel, you can trust your passions and follow your passion. For me, when I started going to music business school, one week the teacher said, "Hey, the next project that I have for you guys is to kind of fake manage an artist for a week and see what that's like. Find a cool artist, work with them as a form of internship or whatever, and help them out." And I said, well, if I'm going to do that, I'd rather really sign an artist and find a great one. So I went online, Googled management contract, publishing contract, label contract, copy pasted them together. Because at the time, the music industry had shrunk dramatically. There were something like 100,000 jobs abolished that year. The industry was tanking because of Napster. This was about a year or two before Spotify even started to exist. And there was no real, promised land in sight at the time. People genuinely believed the music industry was going to die. And I said, well, if all of these things are shrinking within the industry, we might as well consolidate these different sides of the value chain, which is now known as like 360 deals. So I went online, no excuses. You could Google things, you can find them. I copy pasted them and signed this artist and started working together. And within about a year, not even, within less than a year, I had gotten record deals for the artist and distribution deals and publishing deals for myself. And we were doing a lot of things to where by the time I was graduating, I was the first and only student in Trebas history to intern for themselves, because I had already had a
Wow.
distribution deal with Universal. I had multiple publishing deals. I was really active on synchronizations and these different things we were doing. So there was no clear path at the beginning, and it seemed very challenging. But because I believed in myself and just kept going and failing fast, it allowed me to win sooner as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it sounds like you're a trailblazer in several respects, and that, you know, you partly sort of helped define what the what things look like these days. I think this is a perfect chance for those in the audience that aren't as well versed in the music industry. It can be very confusing. I mean, can you help sort of delineate between manager, publisher, label, and distributor? And these days, like in the modern era, what do those different roles do for artists?
Yeah, of course. So you have the management side where a manager is really a Swiss Army knife for the artist. What I do in venture and other industries comes from the whole management thesis in the music industry, where as a manager, you're really there to do whatever it takes for the artist and protect their best interest. You know, you're leading across so many different teams and so many different sides of things. So really the manager is the first point of contact. Then you have the label side. Record labels control and own the master rights, which is the right to the sound recording. When you stream a song on Spotify, or when you experience a song in any way where you're hearing a recording of a sound recording, that in itself is controlled on the master side, which is the label. Distribution is a part of the label side where just putting the song onto Spotify or Apple, or back in the day, getting it onto the store shelves, that's really what distribution is. The the last part of it is publishing that you mentioned, where that's really the ownership of the song itself, the lyrics and melody and composition of it, whatever form it's recorded in. So the recording itself is not including; it's the writing within the recording. If you get what I'm saying. So
Right.
picture somebody drawing a picture of an apple. Okay, this painter who drew the picture of the apple, that picture of the apple itself is the master recording. But the idea of ever being able to draw an apple again is the publishing ownership. So anytime any other painter wants to draw an apple, you have to clear the publishing. Do you understand? So
Yeah.
those are the different parts of the value chain. And then you have the live side, which is obviously self-explanatory. Anybody who's ever gone to a concert, which most of us, it's a very robust part of our industry as well. Clients that I have, like Akon, are obviously global superstars who tour the world and will sell out arenas, all the way to baby artists, like a kid that I have, Trinidad Cardona, who sells out these little high school tours. There's
Oh, cool.
there's all different sides of the business.
Gotcha. So just to make sure I understand, I mean, makes me sort of think of maybe Christmas or holiday music, right? There's folks that maybe a generation or two ago wrote that music, and you had sort of the sheet music and the authors or the artists that wrote that. There's intellectual property and ownership of that, but then if an artist comes and does their own recording of those songs, then a label would own the actual recorded performance of those songs, separate from the people that wrote them, maybe even a generation or two ago. Is that fair?
Correct. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And look, I thought that I knew what I was talking about. I just didn't want to make an assumption and be talking about things, and you'd be like, what is this guy talking about? So, all right, that helps. Obviously, there's been a ton of disruption in the industry generally, but I imagine from the label's perspective, sort of how do you monetize this asset that you invest in? Whereas it used to be a lot about radio play and then getting it on the shelf with the CD or a tape. And now it's different. Can you sort of give us just a quick synopsis of like the degree to which it's changed and if it seems for the outside in, it seems like it's like this is a totally different modern era that is almost hard to compare to the way things used to be.
Yeah, the music industry has transformed completely and it continues to transform. Streaming is a huge thing. Today in 2024, you see 50% of the revenue from streaming going to independent music companies, whereas generally that money would be going over to the major music companies who are generating about $25 million a day, each one of them in profit. And the music industry is a very robust industry that has, kind of unlimited upside right now. The disruption that's happening is just the beginning. Music is the water of the digital age. I believe it's one of the most valuable assets. It's very hard to understand an asset when it's gone through so many different transformations, like physical sales and radio, and now streaming. this is an asset that I think, rather than trying to understand where music is going, it's about trusting that music remains something that is so ubiquitous for the human condition that it continues to grow exponentially. Where exactly it's going and what changes will happen with progress like AI, with things like the major labels versus the independent, the democratization of access, the digitization of the music industry, and all of these different factors. It's hard to pinpoint your finger on one exact thing that's going to happen or to say this is where it's going. But I believe that there's inevitable growth coming, and the right companies that work with the right partners will experience that. I've advised multi-billion-dollar funds and managed and led some of the largest publicly traded song funds in the world. And after that, like I said, advised or partnered with some of their incumbents and some of the other largest groups that own IP and music. And what I notice is that there's a lack of compelling leadership that used to exist within the music industry, where you would have these kind of industry luminaries leading the companies, shaking things up, making dramatic signings, and bringing in and ushering in a new era of superstar artists, hit makers, and people with track records of success like myself. I'm a student of guys like Jimmy Iovine, who created Interscope. Similar to Jimmy, I've always empowered the writers and producers, and I sit at the center of that aspect. The artists, the writers, and the producers come ahead of everything for me. So when I sit down with a company or a major or independent group that's like, Nick, we want to engage you, we want you to come lead our vision. If they're not aligned with the idea of the artist and the talent coming first, then it's never really aligned for me. Because I think one thing we know will be constant is that the talent will always come first. And if you put the creators ahead of everything, you'll win.
Yeah, that's really insightful. That's really insightful, and I'm glad you mentioned it. I mean, it's very clear to anybody that does a little, just even a little bit of research on you. You have a very unique gift of being able to sort of identify and understand what's going to be a widely popular, what's the next hit, right? You've been involved with over 100 global #1 hits, and you've been involved with over 350 gold and platinum records. And I mean, look, numbers don't lie. How do you explain that, right? How do you find and distill? I mean, there's tons of music out there. How do you find and become associated with something that you know or that you've decided is going to become a hit?
The 100 really comes from the one. It's really about the right one person, the right one talent. What I'm looking for is not in an individual song or an individual piece of content or an individual product that a company launches. When I'm looking for talented companies or artists or writers, producers, whatever the case may be, it's about the spirit of what they're doing and the talent itself. So, one great writer or producer or artist can make more hit records than a legion of mediocre people or people with the wrong attitude who are equally talented, but they don't have the right work ethic. They don't have the right attitude. They don't have the right alignment or trust or loyalty. So, I think that there's not one specific thing I look for as much as I'm looking for characteristics beyond the talent. Uh, it's really about their morals, values, principles. It really comes down to their work ethic. It really comes down to this understanding that we both have, that no matter how big or small you are, no matter where you are in your career, once we get together, you're going to push it into overdrive even further and prove me right. And that's what I look for. But when we have that alignment and we go, magical things happen. And we've been able to change people's lives in as little as a year, bringing people from sleeping in cars to being multimillionaires. And it's an incredible feeling.
I bet. So how does that happen? How does this, how does the process actually happen sort of practically? I mean, are there, do you have hundreds of folks that are applying, like trying to get their content and their face in front of you? Do you have sort of scouts out there and then that's help distill it down and then you meet with, I mean, what is the actual process like?
We utilize every lever we can. I have scouts, I have teams, I have networks, I have portfolio companies like Exposure that are receiving tens of thousands of submissions a month. We have submissions coming into my inboxes, DMs, etc. Uh, Friends or people who will refer talent. But really, at the end of the day, for me, it comes down to a feeling that I get when I hear something. you know, uh, a majority of the success that I've had, or all of the success that I've had thus far, has really come from that instinct. It wasn't data driven. It wasn't based on somebody who's already, successful. I've continued to develop things from scratch that were nothing into something. But at the same time, I'm fortunate enough to work with legacy talent and geniuses who, might be the most successful or broken world records. At the end of the day, there's always areas to improve. There's always somewhere to go. So for me, when I'm looking at talent, I'm looking at their hunger for that as well. How driven is this individual to take it to the next level? You know, and
Yeah.
when we have that mutual fire together, anything is possible.
Yeah. Super cool. Super cool. Well, I mean, look, you've worked with artists such as The Weeknd, Maroon 5, Calvin Harris, Alex the Kid. What I think you've reached a level where, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but like you've reached a level where you've proven your talent in the industry. I mean, you were one of Billboard's 40 under 40. I mean, I think your name is out there. What is it that you're after? What is it that really, that if you could say, look, the next 18 months are going to be the best 18 months yet, and this is what's going to happen. I'm going to find the one talent that is undiscovered we're going to partner and make it big. What's sort of the ultimate dream that's pushing you?
My ultimate dream is really about generational impact. It's not just about that one talent right now. I'm fortunate enough to work across projects in Africa with Akon that will impact hundreds of millions of people, bringing them power and electricity and mobile and Wi-Fi. I'm fortunate enough to work with talent whose music touches billions of people. Obviously working with the next global superstars is always a huge priority for me. Finding that diamond in the rough across any genre, from anywhere, any nationality, male or female. It's just about that legacy talent that is going to move generations. That's always going to be a passion. An Adele level artist, an Ed Sheeran level artist, the Rihannas and Weekends of the world. But I also think equally as important is working with legacy talent that's been mismanaged or misrepresented over the years. So many artists that are making 8, 9 figures a year, mega artists, could be doing even more numbers, could be working a little bit less, could have more sensitive, thoughtful management or business around them. And I think the big reward as well for me is helping those people. It feels just as rewarding as shepherding someone brand new and protecting them as it does somebody who's very established and reinvigorating their inspiration and
Yeah.
helping to nullify some of the traumas that they've experienced over the years.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So help us understand some of like a legacy artist that appears to be sort of killing it, right? But what you just said is, you could, at least in theory, or potentially tweak some things or change some things to make them either make more or work less and make the same. What is that? What would that look like? Does that mean how they're choosing to do their tour dates or when they release an album? What are the different levers that you would potentially adjust with like a legacy artist?
Well, look, there's so many, but to give you an example, just in the last year with Akon, he went from 18 million monthly listeners on Spotify to today he has 29.5 million monthly listeners. So we grew him by over 10 million monthly listeners, and we didn't even release any new music. So, there's a lot of levers. There's a lot of things to do. We sold out his first two tours in over a decade with the Superfan tour, collecting all of the Superfan data in a really unique way. What I would say is whether it's a new artist or a legacy artist, and even to go as far as to say whether it's a record label or a music company or a tech startup, really it's about understanding what the problems are and solving those problems. Each problem that you solve is a brick in the house that you're building towards success. So really that's what we try to do, is identify what are the problems or the roadblocks, and let's go build upon them brick by brick.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's fascinating. It's a fascinating glimpse into the music industry. But look, you've also been involved with some cool initiatives and companies with sort of the overlap between, technology and investment in music. What are your thoughts on sort of where things stand now? Are there any, is it presenting a lot of interesting opportunities? Has it changed or improved the industry? What's sort of the cutting edge that you're, looking at or exploring at the moment?
Well, regarding venture specifically, the state of the venture industry is interesting right now. Investment, early stage startups. I think that realistically, the macroeconomic environment has been different since interest rates went up, etc. I'm very close with a large number of really powerful fund owners, and across the board, they're all pretty much, operating from the same shrewd perspective right now that is wise, because again we see that we're in a time that may be a little bit different from the kind of bullish era of the past. I think at the same time it's a really interesting time for founders to go build businesses that are EBITDA positive or that are generating revenue and that don't necessarily need investment or funding right now. For me, I sit across a number of interesting companies like Triller right now, that acquired bare knuckle boxing, and that is a leader across the social side that's just been incredibly competitive when it comes to early adoption by artists. Actually, a majority of hip hop and R&B talent, when they make their first music videos, they are using Triller right now. And like you said, numbers simply don't lie. So to be able to create a platform that's driving so much culture, like a Triller, is so powerful. One of my other companies, Talk Shop Live, is the number one live stream sales platform in North America. And I'm one of the earliest advisory board members, where that company is powering Facebook, Instagram, Condé Nast, Walmart, Target, for all point of contact video sales. If on this Zoom or on this podcast right now we wanted to sell a product, TalkShop Live could be seamlessly embedded into the podcast, selling things without the user ever leaving the video. This is a white label product. I think for me, it goes back to a founder-driven approach, and where the future is going is a place that's going to get even cooler, even more interesting, even more dynamic, because you have even more innovative and educated founders who are learning from the internet at a younger age, who have more resources than the previous generation. So I'm very keen and excited to see where things go,
For sure, yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned early on, sort of your philosophy, your non-negotiable, if you will, is to put the creative talent first before anything else. And I'm curious, like in thinking about it, if you're talking to a group of young entrepreneurs or to a group of tech entrepreneurs that are passionate about, startups in this particular space or startups that overlap, have you thought of things, or are there interesting ventures out there now that are putting the artists, the creative first, that are allowing them to do things that they weren't allowed to do or couldn't do maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
It's an incredible question. Yes, yes. I believe there's many, and there are many more to come. Just yesterday, one of my portcos, Soundful, soundful.com, which is at the forefront in the cusp of AI and music creation, announced an incredible contest they're doing with SoundCloud that gives millions of artists a chance to submit music and place their music with some of the biggest DJs in the world. Soundful is a toolkit that artists, writers, or producers can use to create super producer level quality tracks, beats, or instrumentals in the snap of a finger that they own completely. People are scared of tech like AI in music, but when you look at the technology like that empowers the creator to own more and create faster, it's a win-win for everybody. So I think there's some staggering things happening, incredible things. And it's just the beginning. When you look at a company like Make It, that is MAYK.IT, that is democratizing access to super fans for the artists by creating user-generated content with AI as well. It allows an artist or a label or just a regular person to memify themselves to tens of thousands of users, who will then create user-generated content that can grow and multiply the streams of a song or a product or whatever it may be. So, that's just to name a few.
Yeah.
There's platforms like Exposure and BeatBread that are democratizing access to capital for artists, providing talent with advances and securitizing their streaming revenue to provide debt to the talent. There's so many great things that
Interesting.
I'm seeing right now. Yeah.
So they're using any future streaming revenue as collateral for
Well, look,
the
there's a number
advances?
of companies doing a bunch of
Oh, okay.
different things in this space. Some of them are using Future. Generally, uh, generally, right now they're securitizing those existing streams. Yeah.
Gotcha. No, that's interesting. And because look, I love music, but I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert in anything. But from my understanding as an outsider, it seems like as an artist, there's this if you have a whole lot of talent, the first big, the thing you got to get through is you got to get noticed. But then once you get noticed, it feels like that they sort of throw you into this machine where, your only choice is if you want to make it big, you got to sort of do what the big behemoth in the industry tells you to do, and then they control everything and they sort of take it from the artist. But I've heard you say a couple of times now that you're talking about democratizing. So it seems like this technology is yanking the power from the big money and giving it to the folks that actually are the ones that provided the art that everyone is enjoying.
Yeah, and I think it's crucial to understand that everything great needs a team. And there's a rhetoric about companies being a boogeyman in entertainment and artists or talent suffering. Taylor Swift is a multi-billionaire today. Many of these artists make tons of money. You can say this artist took $200 million for this deal and he, owes it back. What a bad thing. But I think that's pretty amazing to get $200 million for anybody. So, I think that there's a rhetoric that also is a kind of lie that's taught to a lot of artists, where they now in this new generation can get a little bit bamboozled, because even a tech platform is not necessarily the answer for the next weekend. And if the wrong group or partners were with that artist, like Weekend is signed to EXO and Sal and Cash, they're an amazing team for him who has delivered, and Republic and etc. They've all worked together to create this success together. And I think that the concern for the future is some of these new generations of artists may fear working with teams and partners because there's a grass is greener scenario, or I can go do this. It should never be about how much money can you get, or any of these surface level things. It should be about how much do these people believe in me. And if you're not even signing to a person and there's no thing there, there's no infrastructure or resources, that's great if you're your own marketer, manager, publisher, producer, this, that, the other. But even the artists who are doing it all themselves, they'll turn to you in a few years and say, Nick, I feel crazy. I don't want to do things myself. I don't want to do everything myself. I have a housekeeper to clean. I have a gardener to garden. I have a this to that, so that I can free up my bandwidth to go build businesses or whatever it may be. Even though I love cleaning, I actually love gardening. I love these things. The truth is that it's a myth to say you're lazy for utilizing the gardener, right? The truth is that if your focus and purpose is something else, focus on that. And I think, unfortunately for artists, many of them are fed a rhetoric and a lie that is actually in the interest of corporations that want to sign them. It just may be a different corporation attacking the other one. That's why You'll never hear me attack these groups or these companies or these things, because there's no right answer for one specific thing. It's like it's not a one size fits all thing,
Yeah, no, I'm with you for sure. And that was very, very well put. I think what I was going toward more so was that it's not necessarily about don't work with somebody else. You've got to do everything yourself, but that they at least deserve choices for who they're going to work with, as opposed to, well, if I'm going to do this, I have to sort of sell my soul to that entity because they're the only ones or whatever. But if they have the choice, of course, to your point, using the garden or whatever, I mean, there's only so much time in the day. Time is our most valuable asset. Investing to help give us more time to do what we love to do is not lazy, it's smart. But I guess following up on that point, just that there's so much rhetoric out there. A lot of it isn't true. A lot of it may be slanted. If you had the chance right now, you were talking to, and I don't know what age this even comes about, like maybe 15, 16, but you were talking to some kids that in their heart, in their soul, they believed that they've got talent that the world would enjoy and that they can sell out arenas. And you're talking to them and they're like, gosh, Nick, this whole music thing, I don't know what's going on. I just know that I could damn make it. What would you tell them, or how would you advise them?
It's all about consistency, hard work, dedication, repetition every day, the small things, the unsexy things. Start where you are. If you want to perform in arenas, but you don't even have songs, let's start making some songs, for example, right? I think people will create something or start doing something and then wonder where's the immediate results too. Though that does happen, I think having a mind frame where you're just equally as satisfied if you achieve that goal as if you don't, so you're just happy with the process, that's how you maximize your chances of success. These are some of the cheat codes that I would share with that up and coming artist. I can't give them all away on the podcast.
No, yeah, please don't. No, don't. So,
I'm just
by the way, if there's the up and coming artist that's listening, reach out to Nick. No, But it's see that like this is a great example. This is why I do this, right? So I mean, I've talked with Navy SEALs, guys from the Delta Force, folks that are professional soccer players, people from all different walks of life that like you have broken boundaries and have become extraordinarily successful. And I love asking these questions because there's these really interesting commonalities that tend to show up amongst the elite or like the highly successful folks. And you mentioned, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I heard was, look, if you try to focus on the results, like focus on the money or focusing on selling out the arena or whatever, then you're going to have a hard time. You got to focus on the process, right? And I've heard that consistently from so many different groups of people. I mean, even if you're a sports fan, Nick Saban, the famous college football coach, he'll constantly tell you at all these, people say, how'd you do it? What'd you do? He's like, look, if you focus, we don't ever focus on winning a conference championship or winning the national championship. We try to get better every day and maximize our talent. And it sounds like even as an artist that these types of things, it's still there. I imagine there's still parts of it where it might not seem all that fun, but you've got to be dedicated. You got to have that fire to be willing to get up and do it every day. Yeah. Is that fair? Is that what to us non-musicians, right? People that don't know, that think that people just sort of roll, like Adele just kind of rolls out of bed and goes out and cuts a track and then goes and swims by the pool and gets, 600 million streams. I mean,
there are always those freak incidents and those incredible people who are not any less talented than somebody who had to take a marathon to blow up. That are overnight successes, but often a lot of the overnight successes took years as well, and you just didn't see that part of it. But I think there's a mantra that I have around process, not outcome, and focusing on the process, not the outcome, which I've been thinking and saying to myself for over a decade. And I do believe that it drives more success. The people that I've met in my life who want the greener grass, want immediate things, are driven by money and driven by material things. Even the coolest, most incredible, best looking, successful ones have, either ended up really miserable or crashed and burned that I've seen. I've never met somebody like that who's genuinely just like happy every day with their life. Right. And I think one of the most underrated things in life is happiness, because we think happiness will only come from the chart achievement, the success, all of these things. But if we're generating happiness every day ourselves while striving for those goals, it's going to be that much sweeter when we get there.
Absolutely. Very well said. Very well said. Well, so in your experience, what are the most successful artists driven by?
I think the most successful artists are driven by God. I think they're driven by something more powerful than themselves, something higher than themselves. They're not driven by any one physical thing. And I think the best people are, to many degrees, respectfully to even those who don't believe. It's not about God. It's about something other than yourself and something bigger than you. As humans, even the non-artists think they're so important, but when you zoom out, you realize we are important when we are collectively together. So those artists who are treating the makeup artist and the hairstylist just as good as they treat the CEOs and the billionaires are the ones who stand out to me. I had a person in my life who I brought to a dinner once with these clients, and there were a number of different people at the table. And the client is a very, very one of the most powerful people in the world, and they were observing this individual with me, how they treated different people. And apparently, and I had not noticed, they had not been very kind or really said hi too much to these people who were not very far in their careers at the table, but they were offering all this adulation and kindness to the more successful ones. Um, uh, the individual who invited me to the dinner never mentioned anything until later when that person was out of my life. They said, Nick, I'm so glad because at this dinner, this is how this individual behaved. And I never invited them back. I never invited you guys because I didn't want that. And I look at those type of things. I look at how are you treating the waiter? How are you treating people who can't add a lot of value? Because that will determine how you are when we fly, you know?
That's so cool. Yeah, that's so cool. So because if they're not well known or not famous now, and they treat the waiter a certain way, then when they are, like you said, when you fly, when they are well known, when they are famous, then that you may be in that position, right? I mean, maybe not you personally, but like it's all sort of relative based on where they are in the I guess maybe the fame cycle. That's fascinating. It's also really heartening, frankly, to hear that somebody that is, you said one of the most powerful people in the industry or in the world still cares about and still notices those things. I mean, in a world where it seems like everything is always so negative and always talking about this end of the world, this end of the world, that, hearing that puts a smile on my face, because it makes me think that that the good guys and gals win still, and that they don't just care about themselves. So if you had a chance to change anything in the industry, like the way things work right now, what would you change?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be a part of, I think, changing the mind frame for one of those things when I wrote the first articles rallying for a Songwriter of the Year award for the Grammys, which had existed for 75 years prior and never had a Songwriter of the Year award. That year, it was rejected and there was no Songwriter of the Year award created. The next year, I decided to do another op-ed piece and write another article for Variety about this. And that year they announced they are going to launch a Songwriter of the Year category. Now, I can't take too much credit other than just raising my voice, but what I could say is that impact was really significant. Another one that's important to me is getting songwriter master points on a record. Songwriters do not participate in what we discussed earlier, this record label master side of the revenue. Yet producers do, who are the counterparts of songwriters. So shifting that someday would be really amazing. And if tomorrow I was appointed, head of Universal Music or one of these major labels, that's one of the first things that I would start working on.
That's great, man. That's really cool. Well, look, I think you've already made a huge impact on the industry. I appreciate the time that you've given me, and I don't want to take any more of it. I know you got a whole bunch of other things to do, but this is going to be a great sort of quick insight look behind the curtain into the music industry. And I hope that, it gets you some interesting views. If there's folks that really, is there a place that you would send folks to learn more, or to your website, or is there a place that?
Yeah, you could add me at Nick Jarjour on social media, NickJarjour. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. Feel free to check us out at jarjourco.com. And, what I would say is just keep pursuing your dreams. Keep doing your thing. Reach out to me or anyone on my team if you're a talented artist, founder, producer, writer. You work across whatever industry and you feel a connection here with our ethos. We're always happy to connect.
Awesome. Well, sincere thanks for your time, Nick. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Don't forget, everybody, you can find Boundary Breakers in a lot of places. You can watch our episodes on the Boundary Breakers YouTube channel, or you can listen to each podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the other major podcasting platforms. Thanks for listening.